At number 10, we have Kumon, so the tutoring. Arby's is at number 9. At number 8, we have Hampton by Hilton. At number 7, Culver's. Number 6 is Dunkin'. Number 5 is Ace Hardware. Number 4, the UPS. At number 3, we have Popeyes, Louisiana. At number 2, we have Jersey Mike's. Number 1 is easy because it's the same company that it has been for the last 3 years, which is Taco Bell.
Welcome to the Art of Franchise Marketing. Each episode takes a deep dive into the franchise space and explores how the biggest and best brands handle national branding, franchise development, employee recruitment, and localized marketing on a daily basis. This podcast is brought to you by NetSertive, a localized digital marketing partner for franchise networks. NetSertive's Madeline Park talked shop with franchise executives to discuss what's working, what's not, and answers the question, what else can you be doing to excel at the art of franchise marketing?
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Art of Franchise Marketing. Today is going to be a very exciting one. I'm here with Tracy from Entrepreneur, and we are going to be talking about the Entrepreneur Franchise 500. Tracy, thank you for joining me today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So before we get into the list, Tracy, talk to me about what you do at Entrepreneur and why Entrepreneur has such a focus on franchising now compared to a lot of other business magazines. They are really the leaders in the space, giving a spotlight to, our fabulous industry.
Well, my title at Entrepreneur is Special Projects Editor. And for the last 20 years, I have been working on Entrepreneur's franchise lists and rankings and other franchise coverage. So, our big project that we do every year is the Franchise 500. This is the 45th annual Franchise 500 coming out this year. The very first one came out in 1980. But also off of the Franchise 500 and all of the data that we gather for that, we do other franchise lists and rankings, both in the magazine and online throughout the year. So we have things like top franchises for veterans, fastest growing franchises, top low-cost franchises. So if you're interested in franchising, whatever your interest is, those lists can be a great jumping off point.
Why do you think the Franchise 500 is so important for franchisors to know about and beyond? I think it makes a lot of sense for people who are interested in franchising. It's a very easy list to go on, right? Entrepreneur is popular, it's trusted. But for franchisors, why is this an accolade that they really should focus on?
Okay. Well, and to go back to your second question before, what I forgot to answer about why does Entrepreneur cover franchising so extensively when a lot of business magazines do not? Obviously, we've been doing it for a long time. So I cannot go back into, 45 years ago in the minds of our founders and why they chose to make franchising a part of the magazine. But I can say our former CEO, Peter Shea, who passed away just this year, his son wrote a really lovely tribute to him that was in the front of our magazine in a recent issue. And one of the things that he pointed out was that Peter had a background in franchising. He had been a franchisor, and that was how he discovered Entrepreneur magazine and then decided to buy the magazine and really brought it out of bankruptcy and made it the successful publication that it is today. But for him, it was important to continue to keep franchising in the magazine and continue to cover the franchise world. A lot of people might argue that franchisees are not entrepreneurs, but we have argued that we believe that they are entrepreneurial, and obviously franchisors are entrepreneurial. And I think for franchisors being in the Franchise 500, in a way, it's a lot of bragging rights. It's being able to say we are the number one franchise. I know a lot of them take it very seriously and care a lot about it. But we encourage franchisors. This is just even if you're not going to rank in the Franchise 500, because we get, well, this year we got 1,389 applications.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So only about 35% of all the applicants actually make it into the Franchise 500, the top 500. But all of them get to be listed in that January issue of the magazine that is on newsstands in January. And so that's great exposure if you are, looking to find new franchisees. Just being on that list, even if you're not ranked, gets your name out there, lets people know that your opportunity exists. And, we do have readers come to us and say, I found my franchise, through Entrepreneur Magazine, through the Franchise 500. And that's how I discovered this particular brand. And then I did my research and decided that, yes, this was the brand that I wanted to go into business with. So it's great exposure for franchises, big or small. And, it allows us to kind of celebrate the industry and what they're doing and, the success that franchise businesses are seeing in their growth and their franchisees and, and the technology that they're embracing and helping to build upon. So for us, it's a big celebratory issue for the franchise industry.
I remember when I was working over at Made Pro, we were on the list for, the first time. And I remember waiting outside of a Barnes and Noble for it to open so I could run in and get it off the stand. And it was, one of the coolest moments in my career, just being able to see your logo in there. And it wasn't a paid placement, it was earned. And that was really special for us. And I think, to your point, what's so great about what Entrepreneur does for franchising is it is that kind of megaphone that most franchisors and franchisees don't have and probably will never have. And franchising is so sticky, as I'm sure you've seen. Like, once you get it, once you've seen it, once you've interacted with it, usually you don't leave, or usually you're always, that's in the back of your mind. So until someone has that experience, like the founder's son with franchising, or the CEO's son, with franchising, it's like a world, it's like its own dark world. It's like the dark web. Like, you don't open the door until you open the door. And not that franchising is the dark web, but I think it's really great, what you guys are doing there. So, without further ado, since today is the day that we're announced, I know we're recording it ahead of time, but I'll just say today is the day we're announcing it. Do you want to go ahead and let us know who the top 10 in the Franchise 500 are?
Number one is easy because it's the same company that has been for the last 3 years, which is Taco Bell. And that makes 4 years in a row at number one for them. They are only the second franchise brand to have that distinction. The other one would be Subway, which I don't remember exactly what their record is. I know Taco Bell has a few more years to go if they want to beat them, but to be only the second franchise brand to make number one 4 years or more in a row is pretty impressive. And then at number two, we have Jersey Mike's. This is their highest ranking ever, so they're moving up there. They're going to challenge Taco Bell. Let's see in the future. At number three, we have Popeye's Louisiana Kitchen. Number four, the UPS store. Number five is Ace Hardware. Number six is Dunkin'. I almost said Dunkin' Donuts, but it's been Dunkin' for a while. No donuts. I mean, they still have donuts, but number seven, Culver's. And Culver's is kind of, our little engine that could in the top 10. They've been in the top 10 for several years now, but they're interesting because, most of the top 10 companies have thousands of locations and they're at least nationwide or worldwide. But Culver's they have a little less than 1,000 units. I think they're probably going to top 1,000 soon, and they're regional. They are not even throughout the entire U.S. I've never eaten at a Culver's. I would like to try it, but
Culver's, send us some.
And then after Culver's at number 8, we have Hampton by Hilton. So they've been a very successful hotel brand on the list. Arby's is at number 9, and this is Arby's first time in the top 10 since sometime in the 1990s, I believe.
Wow.
I'd have to double check that, but it's been a long time. So Arby's is on the up and up. And then finally at number 10, we have Kumon, so the tutoring service.
So what I like about this too is that it really spans a lot of different industries. I think most people would probably anticipate it's all going to be QSR, all hotel, these major billion-dollar companies. But to your point, like we have Culver's, we have Kumon, there's people up there or brands up there, competing with the big guns as well. So now, Tracy is going to take us through a couple of the number ones in their respective categories. And why this matters is there are just so many great franchise brands out there, and not to mention there's a lot of not great brands out there. So to be number one in your category is really special. It lets you know like you're at the pinnacle of your competitive sector, because as much as we understand that, any brand could compete with the big dogs, sometimes it's, one step at a time. So the number one in categories are definitely something special. So Tracy, why don't you take us through some of those?
Right, so we call our franchises that are number one in category our best of the best franchises, and we actually publish that list separately in a later issue, but we do identify them as well in the Franchise 500 issue. So like you were saying, franchising is so much more than just QSR. People who are not really familiar with the industry, the first brands that come to mind are QSR franchises, but pretty much any type of business that you could think of has been franchised by now. We actually have some new categories this year. One of them is mental health services. So, that's an interesting one because, again, like 45 years ago when the Franchise 500 first started, I don't think anyone would have thought, someday there's going to be a mental health clinic franchise, but we have a couple of them now, and the number one in that category is Ellie Mental Health, which is a relatively new franchise, but they have really grown, and we actually have an article in the issue that talks about them, as well as several other brands that moved up a lot in the list this year in their ranking. So that's an interesting one. Then we have a lot of children's franchises, and we have quite a few enrichment program franchises that apply for our listings. So we've actually divided up the enrichment category into 3 different categories. So under music enrichment, our number one franchise is School of Rock, which is a brand name that I think most people will recognize. Mm-hmm. They've got about 350 locations at this point, so they're good size, but they are still growing. And then we also have quite a few what we call STEM franchises, STEM enrichment. So that's science, technology, engineering, and math. And many of them do STEAM enrichment also, which the A in the STEAM is art. So number one in that category, which is a very competitive category, is Snappology. So they offer the STEAM education programs. And then we have just a kind of miscellaneous enrichment category for everyone else who doesn't fit into music or STEM. We have several cooking classes, art classes, coding classes. The number one franchise in that miscellaneous enrichment programs category is Drama Kids, which is a franchise they've been around since 1989. They actually, I think they have a pretty big presence internationally. And, they obviously do have a presence in the U.S. as well. So, that's kind of our enrichment categories in the Franchise 500. So fitness is another big category that got big enough to where we decided a couple of years ago that we should split it up into several different categories to kind of recognize that there are different types of fitness franchises, especially nowadays. You've got kind of the big box ones, and then you've got a lot of the more boutique concepts that focus on a specific type of fitness. So within fitness, we have our general fitness category. Number one this year is Crunch, which I believe it might be their first time at number one. They are growing really well and kind of took on some of the bigger guys and came out as number one this year. And then we also have Bar Fitness franchise. So number one in there is Pure Bar from Exponential. We have a boxing and kickboxing fitness category. And number one this year is Mayweather Boxing and Fitness. So that's a relatively new brand. I guess they started franchising in 2018. Obviously, they've got a big name behind them, so that is helping them to grow really well. And then we have a cycling category, cycling fitness, which number one this year is Cycle Bar, again from Exponential, and then Pilates Fitness from Exponential. Again, we have Club Pilates. And then we finally have a yoga fitness category, which is, again, the number one in that category is from Exponential Yoga 6. So,
talk about picking the right brands.
Like I said, there are a ton of fitness franchises. If you're interested in fitness, there's just about every kind of fitness that you could think of. We also have, assisted stretching franchises and children's fitness franchises. So it's a very rich category. If you're a fitness person and that's the kind of business that you think you would want to run, there are a lot of options to look at.
I need a fitness franchise where I don't have to move. I still get all the benefits, but I don't actually have to move.
Well, I don't know if you have to move or not, but there are some newer franchises that are doing the electrical muscle stimulation.
Listen, I like where your head's at, Tracy.
So I don't know if that still involves you doing things while you're being electrically stimulated.
I'll lay down and you can electrocute me if I can lose a few lbs.
I don't know how it works.
Oh, I love it.
So yeah, pets are, another popular set of categories because, spending on pets just keeps increasing every year. It doesn't matter what's going on with the economy, what's going on in the world. People are going to keep spending money on their pets. And plus, we all love our animals. So we have several pet categories in our listings. We have a dog training category. And number one in dog training this year is Dog Training Elite, which is a franchise that they've been franchising since 2015, and they've grown pretty big already. They've already got over 300 franchises open. So, and then we have pet care category, which is, the daycare, boarding, also in-home pet sitting, pet walking, any franchises that fall under that. So number one in that is Dogtopia, and they've been our number one in that category for several years. They've had really good growth. They just topped 200 something franchises this year. So they're just continuing to grow really well, and they are in the top 100 in the Franchise 500. And
awesome.
We've seen them there for a few years now. Also in the top 100 is Pet Supplies Plus, which is number one in our pet stores category. And they're, I believe, the biggest brand in the pet stores category. They've really had some good growth over the last few years. And finally, we have our miscellaneous pet businesses category. So this is, again, the kind of catch-all category for everyone that doesn't fit into the other ones. And number one there is Aussie Pet Mobile. So they offer mobile pet grooming services, and they've been around since 1996. A relatively small franchise, but they've been going strong for a long time.
I love it. Now, Tracy, why don't you give us some of the home services one, and then for everyone else in your other categories, I love you guys too, but there's just not enough time on this podcast, so we will. Yeah, she's got that's the magazine.
We've got over 150 categories in the magazine, so like I said, there's something for everyone there. Obviously, our commercial cleaning category is always a big one. There are a lot of commercial cleaning franchises, and they tend to be popular because they are usually lower cost franchises and also, services that are needed. So number one this year, and I believe this is their first time at number one, is Stratus Building Solutions. And they've just had really strong growth for the last few years. So they continue to build on that. And then in our residential cleaning category, which is always really competitive, we have at number one, the maids. So they are, a residential cleaning maid service. And also we have restoration services, which is always a strong category and touted as being recession resistant because, no matter what the economic conditions are, sorry, no matter what the economic conditions are, there's still going to be disasters that are going to need to be cleaned up, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And these people are, there to help, which is, kind of probably a very rewarding business to be able to help people to get their homes or their businesses back into the condition that they were before something bad happened. So number one there is ServPro, and ServPro has done very well in our rankings for many years. They just barely missed out this year on being in the top 10. They are ranked number 11, but they are at the top of the restoration services category, which is, like I said, a very competitive category. There are actually 4 brands in the top 100 for that category.
Wow.
So very strong category.
And Tracy, how is this list ranked? Because I know that there's a lot of people who can just say, hey, I'm going to make a list of the best franchises and put it on Google and everyone's going to, really there's so many out there that are, subjective, pay to play. How does entrepreneur make this list? How do you get on this list? And how is the ranking work? Because I know there's a very big process behind it. It's not just who's Tracy's best friend or who slipped Jason a 50, right? There is an actual process behind there. So can you talk us through that?
Yeah, if only it was that easy. No, it is a very involved process, as you said. So we start out usually in June. We reach out to all of the franchisors that we have in our database, and we also start reaching out to franchisors that we don't have in our database and trying to get them to become a part of it. And we invite them to fill out our application, which is a very extensive online application. And in addition to filling out that application, they're required to give us a copy of their franchise disclosure document, and it needs to be a current copy. So we do have some, companies that give us an old one, and we either have to get a newer one or we do not include them in the list. And then they are also required to give us a list to help verify the number of franchises that they're reporting as being open. So we ask them for a list of either locations or territories or something that helps us to verify the numbers that they're reporting to us. So our team then reviews those applications. We check the information that they fill out on the form against their FDD and against the list and against everything else that they send us. And we, make sure that everything looks correct. If if there are any questions or inconsistencies, we go back to the company and try to get those ironed out. So, like I said, it's a very involved process, not just us taking their word for it on anything. We try to double check everything that we receive and make sure that it's as accurate as possible to make sure that we're giving our readers the correct information and that we're ranking these companies on the correct information. So once we've got all of that information in the system and made sure that it's as correct as we can get it, then we have a proprietary formula that we have created over our 45 years of doing this. And we continue to evolve that formula as time goes on. But basically, it looks at more than 150 data points for each franchise and compares them in order to come up with the rankings. So each franchise receives a score based on all of those data points and how they are run through the formula. And then the franchises with the highest score are ranked in order and become the Franchise 500. So obviously we can't go into the details on what all 150 plus data points are, but there we have what we call kind of our 5 pillars, which is the 5 general areas that our data looks at, which is costs and fees, size and growth, franchisee support, so the support that they receive from the franchisor, brand strength, and then financial strength and stability, and that's the financial strength of the franchisor.
And do brands that have more locations get more points? So like, is it skewed a little bit more towards, a more established brand rather than an emerging brand?
Right. So, as I said, size and growth is one of those pillars that we look at, but it is not the only pillar. Certainly, it is important because size is going to affect brand strength, and their growth is, if we want to be recognizing franchises that are having healthy growth. But
Right.
we look at many other factors, and we also try to kind of compare apples to apples where we can. So we're not always comparing Bob's Burgers that has 5 units to Kumon that has 20,000 units or whatever it is. So we have different ways of comparing the franchises and different ways of grouping them by how much they cost, by what category they're in, by what their size is. And so we try to make it so that it is not just about size. So Culver's is kind of the, proof that this is not just who are the biggest franchises. They do have great growth, but they are not, not anywhere close to being one of the largest franchises on the list. So yeah, we try to get a holistic view of what the franchise looks like, how it's doing, how it's performing, how healthy is it, and how good of an opportunity might it be for a franchisee.
And Tracy, my last question is, one of your pillars is support. And I think a lot of things, or there's a lot of unspokens when it comes to support, and that often shows in franchise validation. So how are you guys rating support? Is it just what they're stating in their FDD, or is there more to it?
That's a great question. And, this kind of brings up the fact that we're just looking at objective information. There's a lot of subjective information that is important if you're looking to buy a franchise. We always recommend, we say don't buy a franchise just based on these rankings. Do your own research, and that involves, looking at what the lifestyle is like, looking at what the support is like, actually, meeting with the executives of the franchise, meeting with franchisees, talking to former franchisees of the system and finding out what was it like for them, why did they leave. So there's a lot of, research that should go into any sort of franchise purchase decision. But we try to get an idea based on what data we can collect of what the support looks like. And some of the things that we look at are what are the training times that the franchise offers. And again, this is something that we're not going to compare every franchise to every other franchise on training times, but we're probably comparing franchises that are in the same category. How do their training times compare to each other? And then they get scored based on that. So we look at their training times. We ask them to tell us what types of marketing support that they offer and what kind of operational support that they offer. We look at how many employees there are at headquarters and how many of those employees specifically work with franchisees, either in development or sales or training or any sort of support role, to give us an idea, how much support is available to the franchisees. We also look at whether financing is available, and we look at litigation, if there's any litigation of franchisees against the franchisor, because that gives us an idea of how happy the franchisees are. If there's a ton of litigation, then they're probably not feeling supported, and there's probably something wrong there.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you bringing to light that, one, this list is not the end all be all. And that's not to, say it's not important at all, but it's important to note that, yeah, there's a lot of due diligence that needs to go into purchasing a franchise, not just, what's number one on Uber Eats today, right? What are we having for dinner? This is like oftentimes a 10-year decision. And after that too, bringing to light that there's a lot of subjective nature that goes into that franchisee support, because you, just as I know, you cannot please everyone. And imagining trying to please hundreds, if not thousands of people on a daily basis for 10 years is just not ever going to happen. So, it's more to your point about the holistic numbers, the holistic strategy. And really what we get down to is your list is created with a formula that is created based on fairness, based on opportunity, and based on the success of just the franchise industry itself. This is not a list where you can pay and be in the top 10. This is not a list where you have a handshake or best buds, or someone who knows someone. This is a list that is third party and can be trusted. And so, Tracy, I really appreciate you giving us kind of a deeper dive into that. And I want to give you, one more opportunity. What would you like to say to the people and the brands that are involved with the Franchise 500 this year?
Congratulations. If you made it into the top 500, it's, like I said, a very prestigious achievement, especially as the ranking does become more competitive every year. But I would say also to the brands that didn't make it into the top 500, that by no means means that you are not a great franchise opportunity and a great franchise brand. There are some awesome brands that just don't make it into the top 500. And that's part of why we list all of them. And that's part of why we do our other lists and rankings throughout the year. To your point earlier, where you asked, will a more established brand have a better chance of ranking? Yes. They're going to have better brand strength. They're going to have bigger size. So we do see newer brands managing to make it into the top 500, but not a lot of them. And that's why we also do a list of the top new and emerging franchises, because we want to give those franchises that are just up and coming and are going to be the next big brand the chance to shine as well. So we try to recognize franchises throughout the year from many different angles, and give our readers, a perspective on, there's so many different franchise opportunities out there. And if you are interested in a franchise, there's absolutely, probably one out there for you. And we just, again, recommend that, do your research, start with us, and then do your research from there. And you can find something that will fit your lifestyle and fit your preferences and fit your passions.
I love that, Tracy. Thank you so much. And, I couldn't agree more. One, I think, for those that made it, congratulations. I know the feeling. For those that are on the list and not quite there, what's more exciting than being an entrepreneur and climbing and growing and working towards, a list that's on entrepreneur, so there's always a goal in mind. And lastly, I would say, I don't think there's any other industry where you can take a singular brand, small, emerging, and you're going to be greeted with open arms and put into the same conversation as one of the giants like McDonald's. So, if you're a small QSR burger franchise, you're being rated against, some of the top ones. And that's an opportunity in and of itself. To even be considered to be in the same room as them is something that's super special and franchising brings to the table. So, Tracy, thank you so much. For anyone who's interested in learning more about the Franchise 500 and Entrepreneur, you can contact me, you can contact Tracy, and of course, you can go to Entrepreneur Media. And when you go to any of the stores that you're going to today, pick up Entrepreneur so you can see the full list of the Franchise 500 out now. Thanks, Tracy.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Art of Franchise Marketing. This show is brought to you by NetCertive. We help franchise brands and multi-location businesses run localized digital marketing at scale. To learn more, visit netcertive.com.